614.
Ni aje watu wetu?
Liron and K hapa. Umekuaje mtu wangu?
Sambamba.
Kabisa.
Kabisa.
Kunywa maji. Kuna topic hapa. There's a topic here. It's mainly directed to you.
Okay.
So I'm gonna give like a short like an introduction, right? So it says, since Ronnie, you're passionate about culture. Now that you're no longer in your native environment, I guess here they mean you're no longer in Kenya.
Yep.
And even when you were in Kenya, you had already adopted some form of Western culture in terms of you were living kind of Western life, which is given, true?
Yeah.
How are you planning to keep your culture alive now that you're in the diaspora? Case in point, dowry payment. So I really don't know. I'm trying to assume what this person was trying to ask is, how are you going to keep the culture alive in terms of dowry payment? I may be giving a background on dowry in Africa. Most of the time, when you ask for my hand in marriage, it was a different kind of setting, maybe 100 years ago, because it's not what it is right now. It has evolved over time. It used to be you identify a girl, especially where the communities that we come from. You identify a girl, you go tell your, I don't know, I think it was your uncle or something. Then your uncle will send...
First I think our friends. Then family. Yeah, that way.
Yeah.
Introduce her to your friends.
Your
so
friends.
That if someone had an interest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was your uncles, I think they had to go to that girl's home to find out who they are. I think the clan they used to come from, all that, and find out whether the clans were compatible, because there were clans that you could not marry from.
Yeah. And
I don't know for sure. I have not heard right now with all the intermarriages and all that we don't do that anymore. It's you find a girl you like, you tell your parents, you go do the dowry. Dowry now has become something else. So maybe this person was coming from that perspective. So for you, as a person who you have portrayed like someone who wants to keep your culture, how are you going to keep this culture alive, especially now that you're actually living far away from home? And like he said, even when you were home, there were things that you already had dropped off, right?
Your question is so simple. The values that you have for anything does not die, no matter where you go, unless you die yourself. So my values of what I believe in will live with me until I die. So my culture will still be my culture, but there are some things in the culture that did not work, that had to be pulled down, you know. So those ones, you know, as much as it is culture, kuna zile, those ones that have been passed by time, like FGM, nobody, you know, does that nowadays, and it is not even, you know,
it's not allowed.
Even if it's allowed, when you look at it, it's not. It's not logical. You know why? Why do you toa utamu?
It's for biological purposes. It doesn't make sense not to do it.
Some of these traditions, a lot of them, they've been scrapped away because they are those things that used to happen then.
Right.
Ni sawa na kuniambia because I love my tradition, niendelee kupanda punda badala ya kuendesha gari, you know.
Yeah,
you can do that, but you
gotta move with the times.
With the times, yeah. But there are those traditions that we hold, like even if a good example, Jesus Christ, he had traditions from where he came from. That's why when he was ready to be identified, he went back to. You remember? He went back to where his roots. You know. So, for me, what I don't find Like we Africans, we are not passionate about our traditions. We tend to sometimes
Maybe not generalize Africans, maybe a group of people who are not passionate about.
Okay, let's say that.
Yeah, depending on
Because
who. I think mainly it's depending on who colonized you,
yeah.
or how long the colonizers stayed,
Okay.
will determine.
Yeah. For a better explanation, part of Africa. Because some Africans, by the way, even when you
Yes.
see them here, their traditions still, they can be here forever, but even when their kids speak, they speak like their native, you know. So it depends with a person. Nobody can be forced to follow a tradition. It depends with you, but some repercussions you will never know when they happen to you.
Okay, so now this question is, how will you be able to keep that culture alive, especially the one for dowry? What is your view? Let me rephrase this question. What is your view about dowry now in 2024? What is your view about the tradition of dowry?
That one does not even need me to be there. Everybody today, even the millennials, when they want to get married, someone will tell them, you have to do a dowry, you know, from where you came from, you know. So dowry has been there, but one thing about dowry nowadays, it has been commercialized. People are making dowry look like, you know, because you're marrying from me, you're marrying my daughter, you have to give me this much. But dowry traditionally was what I could afford. I come and tell you.
And also, I think in every culture they had a set form of dowry. Like I know from the clan that I come from, they whatever, if they say that these are the number of goats, it's sheep actually. Is it sheep or is it goat?
Whatever.
Yeah, it's a certain number of goats or certain number of cows that you're supposed to bring, or certain crates of soda. It is consistent over
Yeah.
time. So what changes is that the value, and because of inflation, it changes over time. But it is whatever was paid for my mother or my grandmother, it will continue to be the same. Now, I think this is where this question is: how you, as as a Kenyan, a Meru, a Kikuyu in America, who you're raising your daughter in a different culture, and in the fact that it is highly unlikely. The probability is probably 30% that your child is going to get married to someone of your culture. How are you going, how do you foresee, I'm not going to put you in a point, how do you foresee yourself propagating this over time?
The best thing you can do to your child is to let them know your cultures. You know, let them know where you come from. Let them know your roots, you know, your people. And when we have functions, let her go and see how those functions are done. That way you help her to understand,
Right.
you know. And we have a lot of people who are married out of, let's say, my country, but they still go back with their husbands there who are not Kenyans, and they do the rightful thing to their parents. It's how you coach your child, you know,
And
it's how you show them. So when they grow up, they will follow the ways you showed them, but
Yeah.
it's not a must.
And I like that. It is how you present that information to them that will determine whether they are going to keep it or not.
Yeah.
And one thing that I know where we started this tradition and propagating this tradition is that we already named our children in the names of where we came from.
Yeah.
Yes, they could have an English name for obvious reasons.
You too have one.
Yeah, for obvious reason, but they have that name. So already that is part of their tradition. It's going to be with them for a very long time. So that's part of the tradition. And I understand that the tradition will get watered down as generations go. As generation, we pass generation to generation. But I think for me personally, I think the name is probably the best bet that your culture will be propagated. About the dowry, like we mentioned there earlier, it is going to be, even the meaning of dowry the meaning of the dowry is not what it is right now. Like you said, it has been commercialized. And dowry was supposed to be given to people who are pure.
That's true.
It was supposed to be given. Now it's a whole different thing. So are we going to, what are we going to do about people who are not who are not going to,
You know, this is a bit controversial. I am coming to get. I love someone. She's a widow. Yeah, or she was left by the husband or the boyfriend or something. But they have like 3 kids together. She went back home, and I come here and I say, okay, I want to marry her. Should I pay Rorashio?
I don't know, what does the tradition dictate?
I think kitambo they used to say such kind of a situation. Now walikuwa wanaolewa na wazee, like second wives. But today, if people could be realistic and keep this tradition thing going, instead of Rorashio for such, they should do Gurario. Gurario is a Kikuyu wedding. Because already munanipatia mtu na kamba zake, na Kikuyu wanasema ukipenda mbuzi na kamba penda. Sikatai, but huu ni mzigo mnanipa, si ndio? So hata nyinyi mkue lini, don't ask me for Rorashio. Let me come and appreciate my way. Do a Gurario, no Rorashio. I marry her in the tradition way.
So you're marrying, like you said, I think they were supposed to be married by someone who already has a family, and old men,
yeah.
And that is what we're saying. The tradition has been watered down. So we should not castigate people who are doing things because they do not know. It's actually people don't have any information. They have no idea what
because
to do.
They don't want to
just
ask.
Because
there are people who know.
There are people who know.
In your family, muko na wazee. So if you want to do anything today, before you decide, ask those people.
Yeah, and I agree. Then you have to, like in my family, you have to go look for someone who, I don't know. Sometimes what generation is left right now? Like if I look at my generation in my family, the old people who are there, the ones who have that kind of wisdom. That who know what our clan was all about are probably the ones in their 70s, and they had no one to tell them. Good. No one passed down this information to them.
Most of our parents, age mates, they are not traditional because maybe their fathers were uko kwa they were with their mothers, and we understand them. I have sat down with most of my age mates, and there's nothing about tradition that was put into them, like sit down, we tell you how this is. But when you go to, like I used to go to my grandmother and my grandfather, they used to tell me stuff.
Yeah, and how old were you then? That's what I'm saying.
Boy.
You were a young boy. You were young. Yeah.
Our father's age group were not very traditional. And that's why you find most of them, they are asking for stuff that is not even traditional.
Right. And
when their kids want to marry.
True. And even to me, I still think that even the people who know, the ones you're saying that know about tradition, they know about their people. So they're giving you a general view of how things should go, which is not specific to you.
But when
it's
I'm
not
coming
specific
to marry
to
you, I will go by your people tradition. Si ninakuja kuleta Rorashio kwenu. So your side of people, not even your old grandfather or even the neighbors. There are wazees in the village. Au wazee ndio ukuja, hata si ni wazee utumwa, sometimes even not uncles. Wazee ndio utumwa kwenda kuongea. So those wazees will come and tell us, this is how we do our stuff here. And that is what we will do.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you're saying. But the point I am making is that even in the village, even in that village, you'll find that even the neighbor is probably not part of your family. It's somebody who came from somewhere else and came to live with you.
Yeah.
That's what happens
They bought land.
They bought land there. So it is not their, this is the point I'm making, this is not their tradition. It's just like, oh, I had, this is what we do here. This is what can we come together and come up with an idea. So for me, I feel like we do not have specific, the word is specific, tradition for each of our families on how things should be done. There isn't, I have seen a lot on YouTube and people are trying to come up with, I don't know, Woshokia, Roe Mukaro, you know, but to me, I'm like, okay, fine, you're looking for this elderly people who have this wisdom, but it is according to the environment that they lived in, which is likely not mine.
The best people for you to look for when you're going to Russia are the people who went to your mother's Russia, because you are not supposed to pay more than your mom paid. I'm not supposed to pay.
Yes,
more
yeah,
than your
we
mom
mentioned
was
that.
paid for.
Yeah. So with, I think on this topic, for me, like I said, personally, I think the tradition that we are keeping mostly, that we have kept, is in naming. It is consistent.
Yeah,
it is in naming.
Yep. And most naming and ratio. That's the only tradition I see people pushing a lot.
Yeah, the reason why I'm saying naming is because that is really, you're naming how you were supposed to name. Ratio has been watered down, like we talked about. Ratio was for purity and all that, and all that.
To appreciate the way you brought up
and it
your
was
kid.
supposed to appreciation. It wasn't monetary as per se. So it has evolved over time. Naming is probably going to evolve too.
I read somewhere, in fact, when people came to Russia, both parents, the guy's parents and the girl's parents, exchanged gifts. But today, the girl's parents want to take everything from the boy side, you know.
And that's what I'm saying. It has evolved. For me, I'm going to say, as people who have moved away from where we were brought up, and people who are in a different environment, which our children are going to, they are spending 90% of their time here.
Yeah.
They are going to get the culture from here. And so our culture is going to get watered down. And if we do not accept the fact that it's going to get watered down and try and keep as much as we can, then there is nothing much we can do.
You know, for that point, I would say it depends with you. If you want your kids to learn your culture, they will. If you think your culture is bogus, they can take the culture they're living in.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. Yeah. I'm not saying because even the culture, even the people here have their own culture. Everybody have their own culture. Yeah. Just like we talked about FGM, just as we talked about what was it? What other culture was there? Inheritance of wives and all those things. They used to happen, but we have not carried them going forth. So it's also within us to know what we need to carry going forth, and that's why I say naming is probably the most consistent thing that we have kept.
Yeah.
Dowry, what are we telling we're telling our children? Dowry was being paid because girls were found to be pure. It's not the same thing now. Kids are becoming active very early. So are we still saying that we're going to tell our kids you have to give dowry?
No,
or is it going to be some kind of appreciation?
Today nobody is bothered about the purity. Yeah,
and
you can even marry someone who was a village bicycle, and you know.
And that is evolving. It's evolution.
And you still pay dowry.
It's evolution of culture.
Then,
yes,
the culture has evolved.
Right.
You know,
it's the evolution of culture, and I think that's where this question was coming from. Is like how, what are you going to keep? Yeah, are we going to be so rigid? Are we going to be so rigid?
Can I ask you a question? We have Indians living with us in Africa. We have even white men who live with us in Africa. Do they adapt to our culture and change their cultures because they live in Africa?
I think they do not necessarily 100% change their culture because they adapt. For sure, they adapt.
But they do their weddings their way.
Yes.
They do their stuff their way, and they don't. Sijaona Muhindi anaenda Rorashio kama Mkikuyu ever since I lived in Kenya. Because there is a way they do their
Exactly,
dowry.
there's a way they do their and probably this is another topic we can start. That intermarriage of whatever and but the question you're asking, do we see foreigners adapting to our cultures? They try to adapt to a certain degree.
They don't give it all.
Probably the difference between us, and this goes back to the question we said: who colonized you? How long did they stay, or did they erode your? We had this topic. Did they erode most of your culture and your tradition?
Yeah.
And there was a reason. That's a whole new topic. There's a reason why they eroded those cultures, right? That's why we speak English, right? We no longer speak our native languages, and that's a whole different topic. But I'm saying, for us, we adapted more. For those who come, foreigners, whichever foreigner goes to whatever country, they have to adapt a certain level.
But they don't sink into it.
A
fully.
certain level of
That's why you find
culture.
A Somali, an Asian, a white kid, when they want to do their wedding, they do it in their culture way. They don't go to Russia like Kikuyus we do, and they live with us. So that's why I'm saying we are losing it somewhere. We need to pick ourselves, because they put that into their kids.
I agree.
You know? So for me, if you tell me my tradition, I should, it's my purpose to show my kids what I think tradition should, because this is our tradition.
And I totally agree, and I think that's why they asked, how are you planning?
I've told you.
Yeah.
I don't need to repeat. I told you what to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just saying how you're planning to.
Yeah. So
to keep the culture. It's not an attack, by the way.
No. It's not. We are just discussing. Someone asked, so I'm just giving my view and the little I know, because some people know more than I do. You know, we have elderly people who can tell you about this thing, but the little I know is we can still keep our cultures wherever we go. Mwacha mila ni mtumwa, Swahili word. If you leave your culture, you're a slave.
And I think we've mentioned before, it is like try and influence people in very small ways.
Yeah.
Even in the way, like when you meet, we always say, when you meet someone, you always say, yes, this is where I'm from. Because the first thing is like, where are you from? Because of where? Because you have an accent.
I love my accent.
Because you have an accent. What do you say? That's why you start, the conversation grows from there to say, this is where I'm from, and people get interested. How do you do? You need to have some points, like 5 points. This is what we do. Talk about your culture, talk about your tradition. People get very interested in those things.
I tell people, when you're not relevant, people will say they don't understand what you say. But when you're relevant, they will understand your language. As much as you're speaking pidgin English, they will understand it.
See, you're also talking about, you're thinking about pidgin English, and it's not yours.
No, I'm saying that, you know, like, if what you're doing in this world is not relevant, people will not understand you.
It's true. Yeah. So for that question, I don't know what you feel about what his explanation was, and for me, I said, I think naming is one of the things that we have done really well.
Yeah.
Really, really well.
I should even ask, if possible, if I get another kid here, I will not even give her or he any single English name.
You give them your native, because I think you have to hold on to something. You have to hold on to something for your identity. And these kids will come to ask us, why didn't you?
That's a problem.
Why didn't you tell me? Because right now they might not want to hear about it, but one day they'll ask you, oh, why didn't you tell me? You need to keep talking about it. Then they'll bank it somewhere, and they will remember what you told them.
I've seen people come from Europe, coming back to Africa to look for their culture and their native people. One is Obama. Yeah, I have a friend in Mombasa. The the brother was born out of the country and he lived there forever. He came back to look for his shosho. So one way or another, the way you're saying, you
Yeah.
might think it's,
Yeah.
but they will come to hit it because
Excuse me.
why my name, you know, I have this name. You tell me this name is from a certain place. I want to see my people. And that's why you see even the black Americans today are going back to Ghana and Nigeria.
You know,
Because that is where the roots are.
it's interesting. You should Google your name. And sometimes it shows you where your name is most popular. And that is just the simplest way for you to know where your name is popular, and it'll show you where you're coming from. Because most of our names, leave alone this Kina Lillian, Gironi, leave those ones.
I don't even like that name. You know, like,
these second ones, these second ones will pinpoint where you're from. This name is popular here, and with this kind of this particular group of people.
You know, if someone doesn't ask for my ID, they ask me, "What's your name?" I tell them Muremi Munene. They will want to know.
Yeah, they want you to spell it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I don't know what you guys think, or thank you for always. I don't know, some of these things we talk about, and sometimes we don't even know what kind of impact people are thinking.
Yeah.
What kind of impact it's having on people. So those questions really are, they make us think out of the box.
And also, thank you for asking questions. It makes us go and look for answers here and there and give you as much as we can.
Yeah, and we're not experts. This is just our views.
It's just our views and a little we collect from here and there. Yep, there are people, like I said, who are experts. So,
although I don't think this culture thing has an expert, but anyway, that's besides the point.
Died.
Yeah, they went with it. They went with it.
Anyway,
yeah.
Let's just keep what is there because it still runs with our cultures.
True.
Yeah.
True. And with that,
bye.
peace out. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for the views. We thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
The views are going high.
Bye.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kunywa maji.